Elections are the bedrock foundation of our democracy. Without elections, our system of government ceases to function. Our elections are administered by these public servants all across the country, spread out over 10,000 different jurisdictions. And if those people can't do their job, or if they are threatened to the point where they leave their jobs, then our democracy ceases to function. I'm John Keller. I'm the Principal Deputy Chief of the Public Integrity Section. I lead the day-to-day efforts of the department's Election Threats Task Force. The election community is dispersed all across the United States. There are over 10,000 different independent jurisdictions of election precincts or county-level election offices or municipal-level election offices that literally run our elections in the lead up to and on Election Day. These are, by and large, civil servants who are simply trying to do their best to effectively and efficiently administer our elections so that all the eligible voters in their community have the opportunity to participate in what is the most fundamental aspect of our democracy, voting in our elections. These public officials are just human beings like anyone else, and so when they receive a threat of violence against themselves or their family members or their co-workers, I have seen firsthand the extremely detrimental impact that has on them at a human, emotional level. People in fear for their lives, people in fear for their families' lives or the safety of their family, having to take measures to increase their security at home or potentially even have security details, increase security at the office. And so there are very tangible impacts from these threats. And that's just on the personal, human side. On the institutional side, these threats interfere with election administration because election officials are having to devote resources to dealing with threats instead of the primary focus of administering our elections. And these kinds of threats discourage people from becoming election officials or becoming election workers. And for those who are experienced and whose experience we rely on every election cycle to ensure that people are able to exercise their right to vote, we have seen these threats cause experienced, qualified election officials to leave. And that poses a real risk to our country's ability to effectively administer our elections. The Election Threats Task Force was formed by the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General in June of 2021 in response to a sharp increase in reports of hostility and threats to the election community during the 2020 election cycle and in the months that followed that election. The election threats that we've seen have largely targeted election officials who have been involved in recounts or tabulation of election results and threatened violence against those election officials or their staff or their family members because of a disagreement with either a tabulation or a certification or some activities of the office in which the election official works. The First Amendment provides broad protections for free speech, especially in the political arena, but disagreement with election officials or any government official can be expressed appropriately. And when those disagreements or that criticism crosses the line into threats of violence, the department will aggressively pursue and prosecute those cases. A true threat is a serious expression of an intent to commit an act of unlawful violence. So it can't be political hyperbole, it can't be something done in jest. It has to be a serious expression of an intent to commit an act of unlawful violence. So the threat, again, has to invoke violence. That means that anything that does not invoke violence or anything that is political hyperbole, even messages that are offensive or are reprehensible, maybe intimidating, maybe hostile, if they don't cross that line into invoking violence, they are generally not going to constitute a criminally prosecutable threat. A message that we have stressed to the election community from the task force is to report any interaction or communication that makes an election official or an election worker uncomfortable or intimidated or scared, Anything that they find menacing, we have stressed, we want you to report to the FBI, because if we don't know about it, there's nothing we can do about it. The first thing an election official should do if they receive a threat is to report it to their local law enforcement for a public safety assessment and response. The next thing they should do is report it to their election crime coordinator in their local FBI office. And the FBI is the task force's point of contact, the tip of the spear for the task force to intake these reports of hostility and potential threats and then refer them back to the task force here at the department for an assessment of whether a given communication or a given interaction is predicated. That means that there's a sufficient basis to allow us to open a criminal investigation and potential prosecution. Sentences of 3.5 years, 2.5 years, even 1.5 years, those types of sentences signal to the public at large that federal courts and the Department of Justice are taking threats to the election community extremely seriously, and that there will be consequences commensurate with the seriousness of the activity. And so the most important message, I think, is to would-be offenders, people who are upset with some aspect of an election, people who are upset with their local or federal government. Hopefully these sentences send a message that it is, while it is certainly appropriate to voice disagreement and criticism of your government, it is not appropriate, it is never appropriate to threaten violence against government officials, their staff, their families.